All right, here we go. Let's talk about these notes, the Pacific Theater. So we talked about, let get back up here to the top. So we talked about the European theater last week. That means the fighting that was going on in Europe. Now remember, the key opponents in Europe was Germany and also Italy. But the big fight in Europe was Germany. But we talked about early on that there were two theaters or two fronts for World War II, Europe, and now we're going to talk about the Pacific, in which our main enemy was Japan. Okay, so here we go. The Pacific Theater. To set the stage, there is a block on your multi-flow map that talks about Japanese imperialism. Here's what we're talking about. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria. Okay, 1937, Japan invaded China. Okay, Japan needed all these raw materials to kind of dominate all of Southeast Asia. So at this point, Japan has become the major player in Asia. They're dominant, and they are taking over all these other countries and attacking them. Remember, imperialism is when a dominant country takes over other countries to use them for the resources. So that's exactly what Japan is doing right now. And remember, Japan has an alliance with Germany and Italy. They're the Axis powers, okay? So here's a map. This little red part right here, this is actual Japan. And then the part that's colored in the flag, the Japanese flag, this is all of Japanese turf. So Japan has taken over all of this. So Japan is a major world power right now. So the attack on Pearl Harbor, this is eventually what brings us fully into the war. At this point, we weren't really in the war, but Japan attacks us. The reason they attacked us is because they felt like we were for sure going to eventually get in the war. So what they wanted to do was, instead of letting us declare war and then fight an even fight, they tried to take out our Pacific fleet, which was largely at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. So they tried to surprise attack us, and they did. They were successful at that. But they wanted to take out our Pacific fleet before we declared war, okay? So this was obviously a horrific day for America. After this, we declare war. And Japan also attacked all these other little islands, Guam, Wake, Midway Islands, Philippine Islands on the same day, okay? So Japan's trying to like get out in front of it and attacks us, okay? And the saying that you've always, maybe you've heard before, is they awoke a sleeping giant because we weren't fighting. But now we have no choice. They've brought us into the fight. Okay. Now, James Doolittle, he is a fighter pilot. Okay. And he is going to lead some raids into Tokyo with some of these small little planes. Now, these ultimately didn't do much for the war. We didn't win the war because of this guy or these raids. But what this did was it gave us a great chance for American propaganda. It gave Americans some morale. It showed that the Japanese were invincible, because up until this point, Japan was pretty much dominating everybody in Asia. They took out a lot of Pearl Harbor. And so at this point, Japan was a very dominant opponent. So this kind of gave America a little boost, seeing that we could do it. Douglas MacArthur and his huge pipe, okay? He led the Pacific Theater. I'm pretty sure that's a vocab word. Eisenhower in Europe, MacArthur in the Pacific, okay? We did something called island hopping, okay? This means all these little islands out in the Pacific, we were going to take over an island and then jump to the next island, take it over, and take the next one, trying to move towards Japan, okay? So because it's all separated, we couldn't attack it all at one time, so it's kind of one island by one. The reason this was so difficult was because think about what it's like in a Pacific climate. Over 100 degrees, extremely humid. It's jungle, so it's very bitter fighting. It's horrible to fight in the jungle. And on a lot of these places, it's kind of their turf, and we don't know it that well, okay? And another reason that the Japanese were such a tough opponent is because their motto was death before dishonor. A Japanese soldier during this time would rather die than surrender. Well, that makes for a very tough opponent, because usually if you're in a war and things start going your way and it looks like defeat is imminent, everybody would surrender. Well, the Japanese were a little different, and they were very proud, and they refused to surrender just because it didn't look good for them. Death before dishonor. Part of that are kamikaze attacks. So kamikaze attacks are suicide attacks. So this is when someone basically takes a plane and they're not flying it to bomb you. They are going to actually fly the plane into their target and blow up. So they know they're going to die. This is how committed they were to their cause. And that's obviously, like I just said, why they were such a tough opponent, because they weren't afraid to die. Okay. Here shows a bunch of diagrams about how we were hopping from island to island. So here's Hawaii. Okay. we're going to start hopping and trying to take all these little islands and try to get closer and closer to Japan. The closer we can get to Japan, we can actually threaten Japan, which we're going to talk about in a second. Okay. So we talked about kamikazes. So here's some key battles. Okay. In the European theater, kind of the big two battles was Normandy, when we stormed the beaches and got all of our feet on the ground, all our boots on the ground in Europe, and also the Battle of the Bulge. My grandfather fought in that one. The Battle of the Bulge was kind of when we kind of took momentum, and it kind of broke their spirit, and we were going to win. So think of a football game. It's back and forth the whole way. We're up by like a touchdown with like 3 minutes left, and then we throw a bomb to score with 3 minutes left to go up 2 touchdowns. It's kind of like the game's not over yet, but that was kind of like the dagger. Okay, that was the Battle of Bulge. In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway was kind of the big one that kind of took us from being like not necessarily behind, but we were struggling. Japan was having some success against us, and then we won the Battle of Midway and kind of turned the tide. Okay, this was huge for us because we could defend Pearl Harbor better. We could defend Hawaii, and it could help us push further and further towards Japan. The Battle of Guadalcanal is another one where we stopped the Japanese advancement, and at this point, all momentum had shifted to our side. Okay, some movies where you can see depictions of the Battle of Guadalcanal, Thin Red Line in the Pacific, and then the Battle of Iwo Jima. This is a famous one. This is one where we get the picture of the bros raising up the American flag, iconic type stuff here. 20,000 Japanese killed, 6,000 U.S. killed, but it put us within striking distance of the Japanese home islands. So now we're actually having bases close enough to actually reach Japan. So that makes us dangerous. Okay. 2 movies where you can see this are Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. Now, that leads us to our last slide. So once we got close to Japan, we had 2 options. Okay. And this is where you need to be listening, because this is going to help you for your writing assignment. The invasion of Japan would have cost a lot of American lives. And as we've said, there's no guarantee that A, we would win, and B, that the Japanese would surrender even if we started to win. So we started going to a secret plan, which was the atomic bomb. There were rumors that we had it, but nobody really knew what was going on. So we had been in secret in New Mexico, been building this bomb called the Manhattan Project to build the atomic bomb. And we ultimately decided to use it. So Eisenhower had to make that tough call to use it. Reasons for doing it: it would end the war quickly, we hoped. Okay, we could go from being in war to boom, drop the bomb. They're gonna have to surrender once they see it. It would save American lives. We wouldn't have to go invade their country. So those are the good reasons that we wanted to do it. We wanted to end the war quick and save more American lives. The bad part of it, and you need to watch the videos to kind of see these details, is we killed so many innocent non-combatants, women, children, elderly, just entire cities vaporized, just wiped them out. And the pain and suffering didn't end there. With the radiation, those places are still not back up to full speed. Those places would be feeling the effects of the radiation, cancers. And again, these aren't just combatants. These aren't military people. These are just regular old people. And it was a horrific, inhumane way to die for thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Okay, so a lot of people think that it was a bad decision, and it's a very good case to be made that it was a very bad thing to do. Nobody else has ever dropped an atomic bomb in the history of the world. So a lot of countries still kind of hold that against us. When we try to tell them that they need to behave a certain way or they need to do something, a lot of those countries pipe back at us and say, well, look, you're the one who dropped the atomic bombs. So we drop an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, destroys it, horrific. We tell them that we have another one. The Japanese are proud. They don't want to surrender. 3 days later, we drop another one on Nagasaki. After that, they had no choice but to surrender, and we won the war in the Pacific. So that is the notes for here. Remember, you have the flow chart, which is just basic information to fill in, plug in. You have the writing activity, which hopefully I just helped you with. And then you have the vocab test. And if you're in my class, the password is lowercase letters Netflix. And then after you do your discussions and your questions of the day, you are done for the week. I hope you're doing great. I miss you guys. I love you guys. Stay safe out there. Make sure you get all your work done. Peace.